Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is a pleasure for me to open this morning our meeting with Maikel Nabil, our guest of honor from Egypt. We will start with some greeting, and I think that before that I would just like to say that the fact that this hall is full is no coincidence. There is thirst and hunger, I think, in Israeli society to learn more about our southern neighbor. Suddenly, Egypt, after more than 30 years since a peace treaty was signed, has again become a focus of interest. I have to say, though, that during the long period of peace, not many Egyptians were willing to come to Israel or to Jerusalem, and certainly not to the Hebrew University. There is a famous saying that the first swallow does not make the spring, but in our case, we very much hope that Maikel Nabil will be the first swallow of the Arab Spring. It is also interesting and a coincidence that today we have the results of the referendum in Egypt, which says that the Egyptian constitution has passed, which obviously has some implication for the future, and Maikel will talk about it as well. So let's open, first of all, with the greetings. I would like to invite Ambassador Moshe Arad. He is the chairman of the Truman Board of Trustees. Moshe, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, first welcome to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and to the Truman Institute, which is dedicated to the work of advancing not only research in peace, but advancing the peace efforts between Israel and its neighbors. We have already a long tradition in inviting here statesmen, prime ministers, leaders of the opposition of different countries, and also many Israeli politicians. It is a great pleasure for me to chair this meeting, or rather to be here and to welcome you, and actually to welcome, of course, our guests. There is a very interesting point about our guest of honor, Maikel Nabil Sanad, today. His grandfather, about 90 years ago, was a representative of the Cairo University when the Hebrew University of Jerusalem opened its gates in 1925. So it's kind of closing a circuit which started when none of us were around. So we hope that his remarks and his presence here is an indication that there is a continuation, even though it's still a minor in terms of numbers, a voice of the minority in Egypt. We look forward to see it growing and increasing. Without further ado, let me say, Maikel, I watched you last night on television, and I was very positively impressed with your comments, and I'm sure that the floor would be today another opportunity to share with you our remarks. I understand that now Hillel Neuer, Mr. Neuer, you will chair that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moshe. I would like to invite now Mr. Hillel Neuer, the Executive Director of UN Watch in Geneva. Hillel, please.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and for UN Watch to sponsor Maikel's first trip to Israel. Maikel Nabil is a hero. He sacrificed his freedom and almost his life for the cause of human rights and for the cause of peace in the Middle East, between Egypt and Israel, between Arabs and Israelis, and the cause of peace worldwide. Our organization, UN Watch, is based in Geneva, Switzerland. We are an NGO that monitors the United Nations, promotes universal human rights, and is active for the cause of Arab-Israeli peace. One of the things we do is bring political prisoners, dissidents, people, courageous champions of human rights, such as Maikel, to testify before the United Nations and to give a voice to victims. and that was our connection to Maikel. It was just over a year ago that our board member, Professor Irwin Cotler, distinguished former Minister of Justice of Canada, international human rights advocate, current member of Canada's Parliament. He was Maikel's international legal counsel, helped get Maikel out of prison. He asked if UN Watch would help Maikel's case, and we organized a campaign by 30 human rights groups. We petitioned the United Nations, we petitioned the Egyptian government. It was covered in the international press and the Egyptian press, and that's how we got involved. And not long after, Maikel was released, and one of my colleagues had the idea if we could bring Maikel to the United Nations to Geneva. We didn't think it was possible, but miracle of miracles, within a few weeks of being out of prison, he came. We gave him the floor. He testified before the United Nations. He confronted the Egyptian regime, his oppressor, and he got to have his voice. He also spoke at our annual Geneva Summit for Human Rights, which we organized together with 20 human rights groups, bringing victims from some of the worst regimes to speak. When Maikel asked me a few months ago if we would help coordinate his trip to Israel, it's not something that we had done before, but I couldn't say no to Maikel Nabil. And I had the privilege of meeting Moshe Arad, Ambassador Moshe Arad, not long before, first in Geneva a couple of years ago with our mutual friend David, and then a few months ago with Ambassador Moses, our chairman. And I turned to Moshe, I said, Moshe, we have this very special individual. Could you host him? And he replied immediately and has organized a wonderful event. And I want to thank you and your staff, Na'ama, and our UN Watch fellow in Israel, Masha Koski-Sachs, and everyone who helped organize this wonderful event. It's really an honor for us to be involved with Maikel's trip here in Israel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hillel. It is a great honor and a privilege for me on behalf of the Truman Institute to chair this panel and introduce to you Mr. Maikel Nabil. Maikel is a well-known Egyptian peace and human rights activist. He began his political activity in late 2005 at the age of 20 in various liberal organizations and parties, long before Mubarak's fall. In 2006, he started blogging, and since then he has written some 1,800 posts and about 300 articles, which are available online. In this blog, he identified himself as the son of Ra, the ancient Egyptian god of sun. The blog, by the way, is in 3 languages, Arabic, English, and Hebrew, and soon German will be added too. I will come back to the blog in a minute. In 2009, he moved from Asyut in Lower Egypt to Cairo, where he founded the movement called No to Compulsory Military Service. In November 2010, because of this activity, he was exempted from the army and thus became the first conscientious objector to military service in Egypt. He took an active part in the 25th January 2011 revolution and has been arrested a number of times because of his political activity. The last time was on the 28th of March last year, following an article published in his blog, which was titled, "The Army and the People Weren't Ever One Hand." In this article, he asserted that the revolution has so far managed to get rid of the dictator, but not of the dictatorship, blaming the army for protecting the regime. Because of his activity, he was tried by the military court, but refused to attend the hearings and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. At a certain point, he started a hunger strike that lasted for 130 days. He was released finally on the 24th of January 2012 after 302 days in prison, along with around 2,000 other detainees who had been tried by military court. He was nominated for this year Reporters Without Borders Prize and the Nobel Peace Prize. In his nomination, it was written, Egypt's first post-revolution prisoner of conscience, the young blogger Maikel Nabil, has become a symbol of the repression that resumed after Mubarak's overthrow. He received the first Freedom Award in 2011 from the International Federation of Liberal Youth. Currently, Mr. Nabil resides in Germany, where he is doing his master's degree in public policy at Erfurt University. I want to finish my rather long introduction with a short post written in Hebrew in his blog. I'll say it in Hebrew and then in English. It's written in Hebrew. היוונים כבשו אותנו במשך 300 שנה, ובכל זאת יוון ידידה שלנו. האיטלקים כבשו אותנו במשך 600 שנה, ובכל זאת איטליה ידידה שלנו. הטורקים כבשו אותנו במשך 500 שנה, ובכל זאת טורקיה ידידה שלנו. ישראל כבשה את סיני, שהיה אזור מוזנח במשך 6 שנים בלבד, וזאת לאחר מלחמה שאנחנו פתחנו בה. ולמרות זו, אנו מאמינים כי ישראל היא אויבנו הנצחי. אנחנו עם שזקוק כנראה לטיפול נפשי. And in English. In English, the Greeks conquered us for 300 years, but Greece is still our friend. The Italians conquered us for 600 years, but Italy is still our friend. The Turks conquered us for 500 years, but Turkey is still our friend. Israel conquered Sinai, which was a desolate area, for only 6 years in a war which we began, and we still believe that Israel is our internal enemy. We are people who probably need some psychological treatment. By the way, and this is the end of the quote, here I add, by the way, there is a book in Hebrew by Ofer Grosberg called Israel on the Couch, The Psychology of the Peace Process. I think it is pretty obvious that both our people are in need of psychological treatment. Okay, thank you very much, and I'll give you Maikel Nabil.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you, Hillel. Thank you, Professor Eli. Actually, it's a great honor for me to be here today in the Hebrew University after 9 decades of Ahmad Lotfi Said participated in the opening ceremony of the Hebrew University. So today, I would like to thank Ahmad Lotfi Said, to thank Amin al-Mahdi, Farag Fouda, Ali Salim, and others of peace activists, Egyptian peace activists, who paved my way today to the Hebrew University. I'm going to tell a story, not assuming that you don't know the history of Egypt, but I'm trying to reread the history and focus on some incidents in history which we don't usually notice when we read our history. The first station I would want to pass through, it was the democratic Egypt. Since the constitution of 1923 until the military coup in 1952, Egypt was a liberal democracy with free periodical election, with freedom of expression, freedom of belief. Egypt had nearly the same democratic and freedom and human rights standards as Europe. It was a constitutional monarchy. We had a huge coexistence between religious groups, even people who were prosecuted or have troubles in their country, they have to come to Egypt to seek asylum, and Egypt was a place in which you can be safe, whatever you said. I can mention the name of Abdullah al-Qusaymi. He was a Wahhabi scholar, then he became an atheist, and he moved to Egypt because he can't stay in Saudi Arabia, or Arabia at the time, and he moved to Egypt because Egypt was an open society. Egypt has a Jewish community at the time, and during this free liberal democracy, Jews were included in the society. We had Jewish ministers. They participated in power, and there were no sectarian issues between Egyptians and majority and the Jewish Egyptian community. And I have here 2 main pictures. The upper picture draws 3 main religious people, the imam and the priest, the pope of the church and the highest imam of Azhar, and the great rabbi of Egypt. The lower picture is the picture of the committee which made the first Egyptian constitution, which was introduced to Egypt in 1923. And this committee had a Jewish member in it. So our first constitution were made by a committee which have a huge diversity, and one of these members was a Jew. And I'm highlighting these points to show that first, Egyptians practiced democracy for 30 years. And that happened even before Israel existed as a state, and before the first Israeli election. Second, this democracy didn't fall by voting like what happened in the Nazi Germany, but this free democracy fall by a military coup. The third point, that during democratic Egypt, religious freedoms were respected and protected by the state. And anyone who made any crime against any religious group was prosecuted by the state, and the state didn't allow any sectarian issues to stay. Then the story becomes sad with the military coup of 1952. In July 1952, a group of military officers made a military coup. They seized the palace of the king, and they forced the king to leave the country. They abolished the democracy, and sadly, they were supported by international society, even by Israel. I would like to highlight two main characters of this military group, which Anwar Sadat and Gamal Abdel Nasser with the arrows arrowing to them. Anwar Sadat, in one of his speeches in front of the Egyptian parliament in the late 70s, he confessed that he and Gamal Abdel Nasser together were in the secret militia of the Muslim Brotherhood. And Sadat commented saying that at the time, me and Nasser were working together for Egypt, not for the Muslim Brothers. So first, Sadat and Nasser were in the Muslim Brothers. Two of these groups were socialists, so after that some time, they left them, and they also spoke against them. It is said from people who left the Muslim Brotherhood that 10 out of 12 military officers were members in the Muslim Brotherhood. Sadat, in his diary, confessed other two things. The first thing, he confessed that he contacted the Nazi army and tried to collaborate with the Nazis as a way to force the British occupation to leave Egypt. He confessed other thing, that he participated in a terrorist attack, in a political assassination of one of the Egyptian politicians who cooperated with the British authorities. Sadat admitted also a third important thing, that in the next day of this military coup, they had a meeting in the Free Soldiers, and they voted, and Sadat himself voted, that Egypt should be ruled as a dictatorship. Together, these 12 people started the Egyptian military dictatorship, which lasts until now. And because this group were very influenced by the Nazi idea, they established their state mainly on the three main ideology or the main ideas of the Nazi regime. So first thing, they adopted social nationalism, so they changed the name of Egypt. Instead of Egypt, it became the Arabic Republic of Egypt. And it was the first time to introduce the Arabic name to the name of Egypt, which have been all the time known as Egypt. And they started like taking properties of people and putting limitations or semi-communist limitations in the economy, and they used this as a tool to limit the public freedoms and to limit the freedom in the society. They abolished democracy, they abolished the democratic constitution and replaced it by undemocratic constitutions and by lots of oppressive laws. Thousands of activists were arrested and held in jails for a long time. They started a very huge campaign of xenophobia against foreigners. Egypt, before the time, had a huge amount of diversities, and lots of Egyptian Greeks, Egyptian Italians, Egyptian Americans, Egyptian Jews, and others lived in Egypt, was in a free, pluralistic society. But with xenophobia, was trying to image every foreigner as a traitor, as a spy, as someone who was trying to hurt Egyptians, that forced most of the minorities to leave. And the Jewish minority was one of them. At the time, we had in Egypt around 80,000 Jews, Egyptian Jews, who didn't leave to Israel, who stayed until 1954, choosing to stay at their homeland, Egypt. These 80,000 were mistreated by the Egyptian dictatorship. They were robbed by military officers. They were deported, and their citizenship were removed by them. And when I see this picture, I remember that Ben Gurion, when that coup happened, he said that I believe this political change in Egypt is in favor of Israel. When I see this picture, I remember in the Knesset last year's described Nasser and Sadat as moderates. That's not my final opinion about Sadat. I return to Sadat again. One of the horrible things these military officers did is that they changed the green flag of Egypt into this three colors flag. And they adopted the three colors of the Nazi army or the Nazi regime. they never linked it together. They never said why they choose this flag. They never said why they changed the flag of Egypt and removed the flag of the independence, which was showing the diversity of the Egyptian society. Later, they funded lots of military coups in other countries like Iraq, like Syria, like Libya, and every time a group funded by the Egyptian dictatorship changed the identity of another country and introduce Arabic nationalism and introduce a flag with the same colors. I am personally against nationalism in general, and I consider each nationalism as a type of racism based on ethnicity. So if religious discrimination is discriminating between people based on their religion, nationalism is another type of discrimination based on the ethnic group. Nationalism were rising all over the world in the beginning of the last century. It was rising in Europe, it was rising everywhere. It even rose between the Jewish people in the name of Zionism. And Arabs, or not Arabs, Arabic speakers at that time started to invent their own nationalism. And the Arabic nationalism is built on a misleading idea between the mixture between what is Arabic speaker and what's Arab. Because like Americans speak English, but they are not English. Australians speak English, but they are not English. Brazilians speak Portuguese, but they are not Portuguese. Mexicans speak Spanish, but they are not Spanish. So the misleading mixture between what is Arabophone and what's Arabic. Before the 20th century, the term Arabic was referred to people of Arabia, which is known now as Saudi Arabia. In the beginning of the 20th century, and practically, or in what's happened in Syria and Lebanon, that these nationalistic ideas started to come from Europe, and people in Syria and Lebanon started developing these nationalistic idea and mix between what is Arabic speaker and what's Arabic, and trying to promote this nationalistic idea through Middle East and North Africa and Arabic-speaking countries. It's funny that in the beginning of the 20th century, Egypt participated in Syria in a conference as a non-Arabic state. But we notice in history that Zionism and Arabic nationalism were moving together. They appear together, they grow together, and even they establish themselves together. So while the State of Israel was established by the Security Council decision in 1947, the Arabic League was founded in 1945. And at that time, only 7 countries consider themselves as Arabic states. One of them was Egypt. So now in the Arabic League, there's 22 members. These 22 members at that time didn't consider themselves as Arabic states. And at the time, only 7 countries consider themselves as Arabic states. And this Arabic nationalism is based on a fake idea. So it's not based on religion, because there are lots of religious diversities within Arabic-speaking areas. It's not based on ethnicity, because, of course, African Sudanese and Moroccans, Amazirs in Morocco, and Syrians and people in the Persian Gulf, of course, they don't belong to the same ethnic group. It's not based on a language, because there are lots of non-Arabic speakers in the area. So there are lots of Amazirs, they use their historic language in North Africa. And there are Kurdish, and there are there are Kurdish who speak their language. There are Syrians. There are lots of minorities which speak non-Arabic language, and they don't believe in Arabic nationalism. Actually, they belong to other ethnic group. It's also is not established on geography, because you can see that there are lots of states which exist in Middle East and North Africa and are not members in the Arabic League, and you can see states which exist very, very far away from Middle East and North Africa, and they consider it an Arabic state, like the state of Comoros or Guzar al-Qamar. So it's in the very south of Africa, and they included it to the Arabic League, even it's not in the regional. So as I said, Arabic nationalism or Arabism and Zionism, they grow I'm speaking about Zionism as defining Zionism as a kind of nationalism. Both of them grow together, and establish themselves together and need each other. So Arabs need Arabic nationalism to protect themselves from Israel. And Israelis need Zionism to protect their identity from surrounding Arabic-speaking countries. And if we wanted to move forward to a peace and to globalization and to open societies, both of our societies need to overcome nationalism together. The first president who took power after the military coup was Gamal Abdel Nasser. Gamal Abdel Nasser passed through a very traumatic experience in the war of 1948, and he was among the Egyptian troops who came to this area, and he was surrounded by Israeli troops, and they were starving for nearly a month, and after the first agreement between Egypt and Israel in Rhodes in 1949, he had to surrender to Israeli troops and come back to Egypt. That left a trauma in himself, and he was seeking revenge all his life. So when he took power, he was seeking this revenge against Israel, in which harmed him personally. So he was taking very crazy ideas and making military adventures, and he made the circumstances which led to two big wars, which is in 1956 and in 1967. One important notice to notice through this information is that wars lead to traumas in cells of soldiers, and can lead these soldiers to do crazy things, which may lead to new and more wars. So that's a point I want to pressure, that wars in itself, it carries the imperio, which leads to more new wars. One important other thing in Nasser's time, that he made a kind of a deal with the Israelis. The wars was about the right of Israel to have their sail through the Red Sea, and Egypt have stopped there by putting weapons in Ras Nosrani, close to Sharm el-Sheikh in Sinai, and that stopped the Israeli trade through Eilat port. So they have this deal, and they hid this deal on the Egyptian people. It was a dictatorship, closed society, people don't have access to information. So Nasser lied to Egyptians and pretended that the Israeli ships are not allowed to pass through the Red Sea, while he had a secret agreement with the Israeli authorities and guaranteed by the UN that Israel have its right to pass through water straits in Red Sea. In 1976, what happened during a meeting in the Arabic League, that the Syrian al-Ba'ath brought this issue up and started attacking the Egyptian regime and considering Abdel Nasser as a traitor because he's allowing Israeli boats or ships to pass through the Red Sea. At the time, the Egyptian people knew about this fact for the first time. And they were very angry because their government deceived them and were lying to them and spreading propaganda while the same government is having a secret deal with Israel. Gamal Abdel Nasser was ashamed, and a cold peace, which lasted for 11 years, fell in 3 weeks. And that led to the war in 1967, and that led to Israel occupying Sinai. And the point I'm highlighting here is that having secret deals between governments doesn't last. It will fall one day. When people know about it, they will be very angry because they will feel very deceived. If you want to build real peace, you have to build it on transparency. You have to build it on mutual acceptance. But doing secret deals between governments will lead to a huge failure, which in 3 weeks can lead into a huge and wide-scale war. In 1970, Gamal Abdel Nasser made a huge change. He was in the Kremlin, and that happened after Rogers, an American diplomat, started an initiative for peace with Israel, between Egypt and Israel, and in front of the Kremlin, Gamal Abdel Nasser announced that he will accept this peace initiative and he will start peace with Israel. But within 2 months, Gamal Abdel Nasser died. There are lots of rumors about that he was assassinated. We don't know if someone assassinated him because he don't want this peace issue to go on, or it was just coincidence. But I believe if Gamal Abdel Nasser lived longer, he would have took the other direction. After Gamal Abdel Nasser died, Sadat took power. And I said bad things about Sadat in the beginning. I said what he wrote in his diaries about what he did, but Sadat believed that he should change sides. He should make a change in the Egypt policy in the Middle East. So he started his first peace initiative in 1971. In front of the Egyptian parliament, he called Israel to start a peace negotiations and not to use violence as a way to solve the Egyptian-Israeli conflict. At the time, Israel didn't accept his initiative and refused to cooperate, refused even to speak about it. Egypt at the time was very boiling. Egypt had been under occupation for 26 centuries. Persians came 6 centuries before Christ, and then the Greek came, then the Roman came, then the Arabs, then the Turkish. So 26 centuries under occupation made Egyptians very crazy when it comes to occupation again. So that was under pressure. He had to make a change. He had to make a move. So he started the Yom Kippur War, or 6 October War at 1973. According to how Sadat described this war itself, he said that I know that I can't liberate all Sinai in this war. I'm just pressuring Israelis to start negotiations again. And that raises a question: what if Israel had accepted Sadat's initiative in 1971? How many soldiers we could have saved our lives, and how many soldiers we could have avoided making traumas to them, which can lead to more, or may lead to more wars in the future. And are we doing the same mistake again today? In 1977, Sadat repeated his initiative again, and he said, I'm willing to go to any place. I'm willing to go even to Israel for the interest and for peace, for interest of my people and for peace. Begin accepted his visit. He came to Israel. He spoke in front of the Knesset. And in the next year, the Camp David agreement was signed, and it was maybe the second or the third agreement between Egypt and Israel. And a year later, the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty was signed, and Sadat knew at the time it's not a one treaty deal. It's not one treaty. So he made the Camp David agreement, then the Egyptian-Israeli treaty, and then he continued negotiation. He was working on another treaty and another agreement. He understood that it's an ongoing process. It's not one time. But as Gamal Abdel Nasser, he also was assassinated by a military officer in the 6th of October 1981, and a few hours after he got assassinated, the former chief of staff of the Egyptian military, Saad Din Shazli, he stated for a news channel saying that he admitted responsibility of Sadat's assassination, and he said, he described the person who assassinated Sadat as a patriot Egyptian army soldier, and he said, we are all responsible for Sadat's assassination. So it was an inside operation done to stop the Sadat's movement or efforts for peace and for ending the conflict. What we can learn from Sadat, that even a person can be in contact with the Nazis, can be participated in a terrorist operation, can be influenced by the Nazi idea, can be an ex-member of the Muslim Brotherhood, but he can make a change, and he can make a move to the other side. And if we realize that people can change, and people really change, we have to trust that we can do this, and it can happen again. Then came Hosni Mubarak, and he stayed in power for 30 years, and his time usually referred to as the Cold Peace time, but I usually refer it as the Cold War time. Mubarak stopped the process. So Sadat knew that it's a process, and we should work on other treaties, on other agreements. Mubarak stopped that. Mubarak didn't visit Israel for 30 years. And like his successors, he was supported also by Israeli politicians. And he were named several times as a friend of Israel, while Mubarak was first refused to visit Israel anytime except for one unpolitical reason, which was assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. And also he was sponsoring and funding the anti-Israel propaganda in the Egyptian media and the Egyptian education system. As an example, like we have laws from Nasser's time which forbidden Zionism or pro-Israel ideas and punish any Egyptian Zionist by removing his citizenship. And Mubarak, for 30 years, he was a dictator. He could remove this law. He didn't remove it. Mubarak, the state media was spreading the xenophobia and the anti-Israel propaganda, and it was the governor of South Sinai, as I think, when the sharks attacked tourists in Sharm el-Sheikh. It was an ex-military officer and an official governor in the state under Mubarak rule who said that it was the Mossad who sent these sharks to attack tourists. So it was a state which was funding and raising the anti-Israel propaganda. It was the state education system which doesn't put Israel in the map and teach students that Israel doesn't have the right to exist. And it was Mubarak who issued orders for police officers to arrest any Egyptian who seeks to enter the Israeli embassy in Cairo. And for my surprise, he was supported by Israel. At the last 2 years or last 5 years of Mubarak, he made the same mistake. He wanted to change the regime. So he started to move power from the hands of the military to the hands of civilian businessmen or monopoly businessmen. So he wanted his son Gamal Mubarak to be his successor. So all the friends of Gamal Mubarak became rich people. He started to force the military to leave some parts of the economy they control to businessmen. And at that time, two things important happened. That the military wanted to get rid of Mubarak because they don't want their business to be lost or to go to civilians, and also people were fed of the dictatorship. I didn't introduce myself. I started my activism in 2005. Thank you. I started my activism late 2005. I joined lots of liberal parties. Some of them are members in international liberal organizations. In the beginning, I was very focused on issues related to human rights, minority rights, religious rights, and liberalism, democracy. In 2009, I started focusing more on the issues of peace and anti-militarism and non-violence. I realized that we can't separate between democracy and peace. And we won't be able to enjoy democracy as long as the Egyptian dictatorship is using security issues as a way to limit our freedom. So we are not allowed to speak about the corruption in the military because of the security issues. And according to measurements in my movement, we speak about around 2 million Egyptian recruits recruited in the Egyptian army and used as a tool to oppress freedom fighters and democratic activists, and they are enslaved by the name of protecting Egypt from Israel. And 2 million is a very huge number. It's more than the number of Palestinians in Israel. It's more than the number of inhabitants of Gaza. It's a huge number of people who are not paid, who are treated like animals, and all of that under the name of security and protecting Egypt from Israel. So I understood that we can't separate between democracy and peace, and if we want to have a democracy, then we need to have peace. In 2009, I started the first peace movement and the first anti-militaristic movement in the country. We adopt the wide understanding of anti-militarism, of peace, of demilitarization against nuclear weapons, the whole ideas of non-violence and peace. I'm a pacifist myself. I refuse to carry arms, and I think the most members in my movement share my beliefs. In 2010, I was requested to serve in the Egyptian army as an officer for 3 years, and I published at the time a statement saying that I wouldn't serve in the Egyptian army and I'd bear the consequences. And in that statement, which is available online, I describe it why I'm refusing to join the military, basically because of my pacifist idea, because I refuse to kill any person and I refuse to carry any kind of arms, and I consider it's something wrong. And part of my statements, which was highlighted a lot by the Egyptian media and maybe the Israeli media also, was my statement when I said I'm not ready to hold a weapon against an Israeli citizen compulsory recruited and defends the right of his country to exist. Two weeks later, Ynet contacted me and interviewed me, and it was my first interview ever with an Israeli media. And that's very strange, because I have been active speaking vocally loudly about peace, maybe before that time, 2 or 3 years. And usually Israeli media doesn't speak about positive things in Middle Eastern countries. They focus about negative things. And I'm not the only one. There are lots of peace activists in the whole Middle East, in North Africa, in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, in Morocco, in Sudan, and very rare that the Israeli media speak about them or highlight the suffering they are passing through, or even say that they are in prisons because of their ideas. And in that article, I said that I'm a pro-Israel. And when I said that, I meant that I was focusing that saying that any person is a neutral is not an accurate term, because I don't believe that someone is a neutral. Everyone have a bias. And for myself, when I deal in a conflict between a democracy and a dictatorship, as a person who's living in a dictatorship, I can't deny that I'm biased toward a democracy. But also this term have lots of misunderstanding, because saying pro-Israel doesn't mean that I am for the occupation or for building new settlements in other people's lands or supporting any violence done by any partner. Then, so I needed to clarify the issue, so I wrote my big article, which was why I'm a pro-Israel, and it was considered by others, by lots of people, as a biased article, because I spoke only about the positive things about Israel, which is not academic or rational. I was trying to focus on things which Arabic media are not focusing on. But in the end of the article, I said that there are lots of things in the Israeli politics I disagree about, and I mentioned the case of conscious objectors who are imprisoned because of refusing the military service in Israel. And what's very important to mention that the Israeli Foreign Ministry contacted me that time to publish this article in Al Tawasul, which is their Arabic official website. And I agreed, and so they were following me, they were knowing me, and they asked for the article, and they published it already. At the time, I wanted to visit Israel, and I mentioned that I refused to serve in the military 3 weeks after I published my declaration to refusal to the military. The military police kidnapped me from my house, and in the next days, they exempt me from the military service based on psychological issues. They said that I am crazy and I'm insane, and I'm not fit to join the army. It was fine for me. I wasn't allowed to travel out of Egypt for maybe 4 years before that, so now I have my chance to travel, so I contacted the embassy. I would be happy to visit Israel and to start building bridges between both peace activists in both countries. So they said, they didn't cooperate, they contacted me in a very nice way, and even I asked if I can speak to one of them to start the connection. They refused even to let me visit the embassy, and when I asked about the visa to visit Israel, they asked me if I have permission from the Egyptian intelligence, so I said no. So they replied no. 2 months after I was exempted from the military service, something important happened, that Tunisians made a huge protest and they managed to kick their dictator out of the country. And it was crazy. People in Middle East and North Africa, they had dictators living for decades, and no one could imagine that we can throw these dictators out by an nonviolent way. But when Tunisians made it, it proves that it's possible, we can do it. So Egyptians thought in the same idea, okay, if Tunisians can do it, so we can do it also. And that triggered not only the Egyptian revolution, but other revolutions in MENA region. Simply, I can divide the Egyptian revolution to 3 main phases, and I believe there will be more phases before democracy can be established in Egypt. The first phase was only the first 18 days, and it was against the dictator, against Mubarak. And it was very fast, because, as I said, it was the military wanted to get rid of him, and the people wanted to get rid of him. So the military made a soft coup and forced him to leave out of power, and they took power. And then we moved to the next phase, which was about 17 months, which the military was in power, and they practiced a huge amount of crimes. And we were able, through a huge amount of protest, to force them to leave power. But they left power in an undemocratic way to Islamic dictatorship, which is now trying to seize power on the country, and we are still fighting it. During these 18 days, one important thing happened that in the 4th of February, I was going to Tahrir Square to participate in demonstrations, and I was arrested by the military intelligence, and I was kept there for 2 days. I was tortured and sexually harassed and investigated, and they left me in the next day, but surprisingly, the media in Egypt didn't focus on this, and focused on other people who even wasn't tortured. Later, we understood how we were infiltrated a lot by agents of the state. the military dictatorship was represented by Tantawi, or the chief, leader of the military council, Supreme Council of Armed Forces. He was the Minister of Defense of Mubarak for 20 years, so he is part of the regime. And he kept all the agenda and all the laws of the regime. So there is no transitional period happened in Egypt. Very, very few laws where you change it. It's the main system, the main rules, the main laws of the regime were kept in power and were not touched. At the time, I wrote an article documenting the propaganda of the army was everywhere, saying that the army took the side of the people and protected the revolution, and praising the army, and it was a huge amount of militarized propaganda in the media. And I personally was tortured by the military during the revolution, so it was a lie, and hundreds or maybe tens of thousands of Egyptians were tortured and arbitrarily detained during the revolution against Mubarak. So it was a lie. So I wrote this research, or a huge paper, documenting all the violations of human rights done by the military, and documented it by pictures, by videos, by human rights reports, and it's still there online. So in March 2011, 2 months nearly after the revolution, the military intelligence came to my house and arrested me for the 5th time in Egypt. And I was held in a place which was supposed to be unknown to me for the next day, and the next day I was tried in front of a military trial and accused of insulting the military and spreading propaganda against the military, or rumors against the military. So they said all the violations I documented, all of them are lies, and I'm just spreading these lies to insult the military. And it was unfair trial. I wasn't alone. I was one of maybe over 12 or 24,000 civilians tried in front of military trials. And it was a very fast trial. In 12 days, they sentenced me to 3 years in prison. And the same day of my sentence, Ismail Othman, this military officer, he's chief of the incorporeal affairs, he showed in the TV, and he used my peace activism as a way to question my loyalty to my country, and he nearly called me a traitor, and since that time, the military propaganda in Egyptian media were calling me a spy to Israel. While I was arrested 5 times in Egypt, no one ever accused me with anything related to Israel. No one asked me anything about my Israeli friends or about my peace activism. They knew who I am, but they were using this propaganda as a way to discredit me and to attack other peace activists. And the same mistake repeats again when I hear Benjamin Netanyahu support Tantawi and support and said in a comment like nothing will change in the relation between Egypt and Israel. In August, I started a hunger strike, and I said in this hunger strike, I'm not accepting to be tried in front of a military trial. I'm a civilian. I have a right to be tried in front of a civilian trial, and I'm not willing to be tried because of my opinions. If I made a crime, okay, try me, but I won't be tried because of an article, because of defending human rights. So, and before that time, there was a huge silence about my case. The military managed to intimidate the whole civil society to make them don't speak loudly about my case, and they used the peace issue as a way to silence people from defending my right to express my opinions. So this international pressure, which happened after my hunger strike, brought lots of groups to defending my freedom. One of them is Amnesty International. One of them, Mr. Erwin Kotler, who volunteered to be my international attorney, and he made a huge work defending my right. And this international pressure forces the military to cancel the verdict against me and decide to retry me again. But they decided that I should be tried again in front of a military trial also. So I refused this trial. I said, I'm not ending my hunger strike, and I'm not cooperating with this military trial. So I was in my cell in jail, and I refused to move. And before that, I asked my lawyers not to show at the court. So the military judge was there, and I wasn't there. My lawyers were not there. So he decided to punish me by sending me into a mental hospital. I reached the mental hospital. I found doctors there are very angry, and they made it clear, and they issued a statement saying, we are doctors. We are meant to help patients. We are not meant to be as a tool to punish political activists. In 2 days, they issued a report saying, I shouldn't be there. There is no, I don't have any psychological problem. You have to continue the trial. It's not our issue. During that time, the military made lots of mistakes. So they made a coalition with Islamists. So they supported the Muslim Brotherhood. They kept unequal chances between secular groups and between Islamic groups. So like all the terrorists and Islamists who were in prisons for long time, they released them and put me and my friends instead of them. They were stars in media, and they were allowed to have funds as much as they want from Gulf countries, while civil society, secular civil society, were not allowed even to receive legal European and American funds. And me and my friends, we couldn't run for any election because either we were in prisons or the other part were defending the right or the freedom of those who are in prison. So we were very focused on the freedom of political prisoners, while Islamists didn't have any troubles with the state, and the state was sponsoring their campaigns, so it was completely uncompetitive. They also used they limited the freedom of associations. They used the anti-Israel propaganda, and in the beginning it was a huge amount of every day, like in the news, someone the military arrested an Israeli spy, and it's just in the media and no one's there. Until it happened with Ilan Grabel, he's an Israeli-American citizen, and he was accused of being a spy, and of course without a proof, without a fair trial, without anything, and he was in unnice condition for a long time. Until a deal was made and he was liberated. And that also when happened the attack on the Israeli embassy, which I personally accuse the Egyptian state of arranging and sponsoring it, because as I said before, Mubarak had made the system that the embassy is completely surrounded by police troops and no one is allowed even to enter it for non-violent ways. So when all these troops disappear at a moment and gives a chance for unknown people to invade the embassy, that's very fishy for me. After, in January, the international pressure managed to force the military to release me from prison, so I was pardoned by the military, but they kept the charge in the verdict in my penal record, and they didn't remove it, which means that it was a conditional pardon, means that they can return me at any time to prison. That's a picture of me when I was just 3 minutes after I got out of prison. I continued my activism. In 2010, when I refused to join the military, I became the first known conscientious objector to the military service, not only in Egypt, but in Arabic-speaking countries. So I continued my activism, and others followed. Ahmed al-Dafrawi, he's the person in the middle. He's a very brave peace activist, and he also and Mohammed Fathi, both of them refused to serve in the military. They said, we are pacifists, we are not carrying arms against anyone. We are not in favor of anyone, but it's against our conscience and against our belief to carry arms or to kill any other person. And they are very important peace activists in Egypt, and sadly there's no attention around them in the media. They live in illegal status. They don't have the right to travel, the right to travel. They can't work, they can't study. They could be arrested at any time, and there's no media attention around them. I'm nearly finished. Now is the Muslim Brotherhood in power. They received power through undemocratic elections. So, like, briefly speaking, it was a complete play. It wasn't a serious election. And the committee, which made the election, made two different results. One of them saying that Shafiq won, and the other saying that Morsi won, and gave the two results to the military council. And the military council chose one of them. And then the committee gave the other paper to Shafiq, who is now in exile in the Gulf. And so it was a play. It wasn't a serious election, and it was made to deliver power to Islamists because they share ideology between the military and Islamists, and also they know that they are protected under Islamists. So that's one of the paintings I painted inside prison, and I show the double face of the Egyptian regime. It's part of it is the military, and the other part it's Islamic, but they are the same system. It's the same person. And that's really what happens, that when Morsi reached power, he protected and even promoted military leaders, and even when media tries to criticize them, he protects them, and he stopped journalists from criticizing them. Morsi is trying to control the state, giving himself more and more power, and he's now trying to pass a new constitution, which is more worse than previous one, and is limiting freedoms, is limiting freedom of women, freedom of religion, and limiting freedom of the civil society, and that triggered another, or the third phase of the revolution, with, as is some media estimated as around 20 million Egyptians went to street protesting against the Muslim Brotherhood, calling for a civilian state, a complete separation between religion and the state. And during these protests, as I think at least 10 activists were killed by police forces and the armed militias of Islamic groups. But we were successful. The second picture is in the presidential palace, and activists were able to seize the palace and write on the flag يسقط حكم المرشد, or down to the Morshid rule. And the third picture is a graffiti, which I picked to highlight the idea that even people started to criticize Islamic symbols. So that's making fun of Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, calling him Hassan al-Banda. The last picture is a picture of one of the Islamic militias, which Morsi and Muslim Brotherhood used to oppress demonstrators. That's my last slide. I'm here to open a discussion. I don't represent Egypt. I'm not elected in any position. I'm not holding any position. I don't have any authorities. I'm here just to open a discussion, to raise ideas, and try to break the silence. So I'd like to open my ideas about Israel. First, I find it's very significant that Israel didn't experience dictatorship before. So Israelis or Jews before and after Israel, their basic problem was about security, or basic problem about existence. But they didn't fight against a dictatorship. And that's a very different story from Egypt. And that's what scares me and scares a lot in the international society, to see that there are some people are willing to give rights for security and are willing to vote for someone who's taking part of their freedoms and part of their rights for security. And I'm not happy with that, and I believe lots of the international society is not happy with that. I understand also we have a situation here with the international recognition of a state of Palestine. And I think it's completely irrational to recognize that the situation is different. Before, when people said that we are not recognizing Israel, we don't like Israel, it's just a Zionist entity, I was arguing that it exists. You can't close your eyes to the sun and say it doesn't exist. It will forever exist. And I think Israelis now have to realize that Palestine as a state, it exists. And if Israelis didn't deal with this situation, I believe that will lead to more isolation in international society, and that will lead maybe to sanctions against Israel. We have to recognize the situation. It can lead to legal results, and we can't live in the status quo forever. In Mubarak depended on stability and on the status quo, and people tolerated him for 30 years, but it fell. And when it fell, he was in prison. And this status quo is not stable. It can fall at any time, and if it falls, all of us will pay the price. So I don't believe that the policies of the current Israeli government is in favor of Israel. I don't like their statements against the international society, against the UN, against Europe, and I don't think that their statements is in favor of Israel or in favor of the peace process. I believe that, and I recall again the example of Sadat. I believe that Mahmoud Abbas is a good partner for peace, and we can start with him. And no one is perfect in this world, and Sadat wasn't perfect, but even with the imperfection of Sadat, it worked out, and it can work out. We have to give peace a chance and try doing something forward, not only for our generation, but for the next generations, because I believe that our generation and next generations doesn't have to pay for the mistakes which have been done by our fathers and our grandfathers. Thank you.
Maikel, thank you very much. Thank you for telling us your story, your interesting and courageous story told within the broader history of Egypt. And wow, that was a perspective, a completely different perspective of Egyptian history that we know and familiar with, at least from an Egyptian point of view. We have enough time in order to have some questions, and please, some guidelines. First of all, you have 2 mics on both sides of the hall, so use one of them. Secondly, please be concise and to the point and don't make statements, okay? Please, questions. Okay, Maikel, please, if you can write down, and we'll have 1, 2 rounds, depends on how many questions we'll have. Yes, please, 1. And please also identify yourself. Oti, you are the first? Yes.
Hi, I'm Ruth Rodaid. We were talking on Facebook this weekend. I have 2 short questions for you. Did I understand you correctly that, that you said that Shafiq should have won the elections? Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. And the other question is, if you thought the elections were not free, the previous constitution, the parliamentary elections and the elections for the president, okay? What do you think the outcome would be, roughly, you know, if there were elections that you found were better than the elections that were held?
Thank you. Yes, please.
My name is Ranan Forshner. I'm Israeli conscientious objector. I refuse to serve in the Israeli army. You said that you share the ideas and the solidarity with Israeli conscientious objectors. So in this sense, I welcome you. But the way that we are separating ourselves are the way which you said that Israeli soldier, compulsory soldier are defending the right of Israel to exist. They are defending the right of the occupation to exist. The Israeli army today.
Please, I ask.
Okay, you ask a question.
Questions.
Okay,
yes.
Question is,
your question, please.
my question is like this. To come to Israel, do you think that to come to Israel, to speak about the situation between Israelis and the Egyptians, without mentioning even once Palestinians, not as an existence and as a fact, like you said, but as people who has the right to their own countries and the right to end the occupation, is a moral and political thing to do?
Thank you very much. On the other side. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Jonathan, and I'd like to ask, many in Israel believe that the choice is between stability with the Muslim Brotherhood, at whatever it represents, or either chaos. And do you think it's in Israel's interests to be involved in anything that happens in the Egyptian society and its political process when it can't really affect it in a positive way?
Thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, Shri Kulkarni from the U.S. Embassy. One of the things that we talk about here a lot, you know, because you see a lot of pessimism in the newspapers about the Arab winter, et cetera, is that we should focus on the opportunities as opposed to the risks of the revolution. And I'm interested to hear, because, you know, we want people to concentrate on that, but from your perspective as an Egyptian, you talked a lot about things to be pessimistic about. You just said they're trying to pass a constitution. Well, it seems like Morsi has passed a new constitution. Can I hear from you, what are the opportunities from your perspective of the revolution?
Okay, we'll have another round, Maikel, for the time being.
Okay, first question about Shafiq. I didn't say that Shafiq won. I said that the whole process wasn't serious. Like the same committee, which moderated the election, they issued 2 different results. So obviously they didn't count. One of the results saying that Shafiq won and the other saying that Morsi won. So I don't believe that they even counted or cared about counting. It's a whole fake process. If the election was free, I believe that Egypt would have run in the same way in which Tunisia is running, in which Islamists is having some, maybe a huge part of the parliament, but not enough to make them form a government or to be in power. So they will have to find a compromise with secular forces, and this compromise can lead the country forward. This could have been happened if it was a free game and competitive process. For my friend, the conscience objector, When I wrote my statement, I was writing from an Egyptian perspective, not from an Israeli or Palestinian perspective, because there is a serious conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, and there's lots of critical points about the land, about the settlements, and about the Israeli army which exists in West Bank. But that's not the case with Egypt, because all the wars between Egypt and Israel was about existence, wasn't about occupying.
When Egypt was attacked by Israel, Britain, and France?
Okay, I usually I don't like that Israel use excessive response of force. But even in War 56, Egypt had a very hostile environment against the Israeli right to pass through international straits, through the Red Sea. And that is against international laws, against international treaties, because I don't believe we have the right to prevent other people from passing their ships in international straits. And I believe we created the hostile environment, but also I believe that Israel shouldn't have responded that violently, because when you respond violently, as I said, you create personal problems with soldiers, and that will make new wars in the future. For question about stability and chaos. The point is that you don't have the choice. This complete fake argument about we choose stability or chaos, you are just buying time. If you have a good relation with the dictator, you are just buying time. Like what happened between Nasser and Israel. At the time, you are just delaying the day of war. And it's better to focus, to have a challenge or to go forward with a challenge if you are prepared and you choose the timing. And that's better than facing a challenge when you are not prepared and you haven't chosen the time. So we have a problem about we have a conflict, and the conflict is complicated and have lots of elements, and we have to deal with it, because the fake stability which we have now will collapse one day. I don't know when it will collapse. It can collapse tomorrow morning, it can collapse after 10 years, but it's a fake. We are just buying time. We are not solving anything. It's just as if we have a patient and we're giving him painkillers, but we are not giving him any medicine. He wouldn't recover ever. You have to solve the problem to be able to have a real stability. But dirty deals between governments, which people doesn't know about and doesn't believe in, and maybe it's unjust, it's just buying time. And this fake stability will fall one time, and we will find ourselves in a crisis and in a situation maybe we couldn't deal with. The question about from the United States Embassy, I'm first thankful that you came here today. Maybe I should highlight what happened in the parliamentary election in 2010. It was like 3 months before the revolution. Mubarak made a parliamentary election. It was a very fake process, and people even didn't care to go to voting places. Most people boycotted the election, and Mubarak got like over 90% of seats in the parliament from his party. So it was a winning situation. He won. He could fake the elections. He could make the electoral fraud, and he got his people in the parliament. So he's in power. But it didn't last over more than 3 months, and this parliament was fall down. So it's like, if a parliament or a constitution doesn't have the support of the people, and if these people are hungry, doesn't have a good economic condition, their rights and dignities are not respected, they are tortured and killed in police stations, I don't believe a constitution or a parliament or a government can survive in this situation. So if Morsi is interested in passing this constitution, let him pass it. But I don't think he will be able internationally to apply the discriminative rules against women and against minorities which are in this constitution. And I don't believe that the international society will allow him to do that. And I don't believe that 90% or 80% of the people, Egyptian people, who don't support this constitution and doesn't have a good economic status and doesn't have their rights respected will tolerate him. Like, I have been in lots of the conflicts between police or the military and Egyptian activists. And what is very noticeable in these activists is that they don't care about their lives. And in lots of places, like, they are armed, they are demonstrating in very dangerous areas, and police are shooting them, and they are not moving. It is not that because, like, they want to die, or they like dying, or they are suicidal, or they are psychologically ill, but because they don't have something to lose. Their life is completely destroyed, and there's nothing to lose. It's either democracy or because we are not staying in this horrible situation. So my point is that you can't have a stability in a country in which doesn't have neither economy or freedoms. So if Morsi wants to pass this constitution, yes, but I don't think Morsi now, he doesn't have any power over the military, any power over the police, any power over the secret service, or any power over the Egyptian people. So he is only supported, sorry, by international society and by his Islamic group, and which is a minority in the country. So I don't believe any president can stay in power with that time, especially with the huge amount of questions about the process of his election. But sorry that some foreign countries supports him and think that if they supported him, that will keep their interests. And sorry that will happen again, which happened before with Mubarak, that when we will fail, these countries will lose and will harm itself.
Yes, more questions, please. Yes, please. Yes.
Stephanie Hoffman. I wonder if you could tell us briefly about some of the influences, people reading events that led you to the views that you've expressed, and whether you think there are many other Egyptian youths who would follow that same path.
Yes, please.
Hi, Adam Rose. I'm a grad student at McGill University in Montreal. In your opinion, if there were a free and fair election in Egypt tomorrow and your ideal government were elected, how would that affect the relationship between the Egyptian government and Hamas and the Palestinian Authority? Like, what would that ideal relationship look like if your ideal government were elected?
Yes, please.
I would like to continue the question that was asked right now. In your opinion, how much is the Egyptian public was affected by social media? Do you agree with Wilder Naim's statement that the Gen 25 revolution was a social media revolution? And also, I would like to know how would you describe the Egyptian network? Is it well common to find there also voices of Muslim brothers, for example? Not like yours, for example.
Thank you. Yes, please.
How do your arguments? I would like to know, because it's very interesting for me. Fit the Muslim religion, and how do you combine between the two of them?
Thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, you talked a lot about your political views of Egypt, history, and the current situation. I'd like to ask more about how did you organize in the revolution? How did the networks work? How much of a typical organization it was, and how much of a new, fluid kind of interaction there was between the activists? Thank you.
Okay, I should. Maikel, please.
As I mentioned, the first question was about what influenced me and if this influenced other people. I mentioned in the beginning of my speech lots of names of Egyptian peace activists. I mentioned the name of Ahmed Lutfi Said and Amin al-Mahdi and Farag Fouda and Naguib Mahfouz and others, and Ali Salim. Ali Salim and Ahmed Lutfi Said, both of them visited Israel before. Ahmed Lutfi Said came before the establishment of Israel. One of them was assassinated, was Farag Fouda. Some of them was about to get assassinated, like Amin Mahdi and Naguib Mahfouz, and we in the peace community, we accuse the Egyptian state for sponsoring these assassinations. So Egyptian peace activists have always existed. Not because the media doesn't focus on them, or media only focus on peace activists when they win the Nobel Peace Prize, but if they didn't, media doesn't speak about them. So they exist, and they influenced me, and they influence us. I show a huge respect to Amin al-Mahdi. I learned a lot of him, and I think he's one of the greatest peace activists Egypt have seen. And his book about the Israeli-Arab conflict is translated to Hebrew, and I'm sure you can find it. And it's not influencing me alone, it will influence others, like other members in my movement or in similar secular groups. Maybe I'm a bit somehow I don't want to use the term crazy, but sometimes I do more risks. So I'm here making a risk for myself and for my political career. Other politicians usually avoid taking risks. So what I am saying, thousands of others believe in, but they don't have the courage to say it loudly. And I pay the price. Not everyone is able to pay the same price. I don't have a family. I don't have sons. I don't have a wife. Others have, and they care about their family. So that put limitations on how much they can be courageous expressing themselves. So that was my message in the beginning of the day. Like, we exist. It's not the proper environment for peace. And I'm sad to say that, but in both sides, in Israel and Egypt, people are favoring security over peace and even over rights. And it's a process we have to do. There is a challenge we have to face, and we have, as I said, thinkers is like producers. We produce ideas, and we need to know how to market it, how to convince people to promote the same ideas. How a democratic country deals with a dictatorship or a authoritarian regime like Hamas and Hezbollah. I think, okay, the answer which will apply to Egypt, I think it also apply to Israel. In policy, you have to speak with everyone. Saying that I don't speak with X, I believe that's a mistake. You have to speak with everyone, but you also have to control your expectations. So if I'm speaking with a dictatorship, I have different amount of expectations than if I'm speaking with a democracy. So I believe that democratic Egypt or Israel, both of them, should speak to everyone, whoever he was, because states are just organizations working for us as citizens to provide our interests or to protect our interests. And we have to live with people in the same area with people in Lebanon and in Gaza and Syria. We coexist together in the Middle East, and we have to adapt to this. We have to find a way to live together. Sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it works, but we have to keep trying. Even I have very negative remarks against Hamas and against Hezbollah. I consider them terrorist organizations, and I consider them, I consider Hamas briefly as a military dictatorship. I don't consider it representative to the Palestinian people, and I consider the Palestinians are the most people suffering because of Hamas, because they are the one who's being killed and tortured and arbitrarily detained by Hamas every day. About the social media. I mentioned before that Egypt was a dictatorship, and dictatorship usually close the society. Closed society means that ideas are not free to enter the society, and the society, when it produces any ideas, these ideas are not allowed to be marketed. Social media broke this law. So the state was able before to control the ideas in the marketplace of ideas through the education and the traditional media. But through the social media, I can open my own website and promote my ideas. And the state can't censor me. And they can arrest me, but we are in hundreds of thousands. They can arrest all of us. They don't have even places in prisons for all of us. So it's the social media broke the censorship and the control which the dictatorship has over the ideas. And that which started the process for the revolution. And that's why dictatorship hates internet. That's why Iran, China, and North Korea hate internet, because internet break the closed society and open it. And usually dictatorship are afraid of open society. The next question was about if there is a differences between the Muslim Brotherhood themselves and if there is some of them are liberals. I don't believe so. Because they have a very strict rules of membership, so you are not allowed to become a member in the Muslim Brotherhood if they are sure that they are identically like them. And actually, the Muslim Brotherhood who exists now, they are more radical than Hassan al-Banna himself, the founder. So if you compare between the opinions of Hassan al-Banna and Muslim Brotherhood who exists today, you find that they are more radical, not less radical. So maybe someone can find a tolerant person within the Muslim Brotherhood, but personally, I don't believe in that. Someone asked me how I can combine between Islam and my opinions. Actually, I'm not a believer at all. My family are Christians, but I'm an atheist. I don't believe in any religion, and that can make lots of troubles because lots of people doesn't like my atheist comments, and I'm sorry, I can't change that. It comes in one package. You have to take it or leave it. Sorry. The last question, how we could organize ourselves in the revolution. Actually, no one organized anything. It was completely spontaneous. People were very angry. Everyone who said that he organized the revolution and make a whole story about the 17 persons were meeting secretly in high-profile place to organize the revolution. All of these are lies. It was a very spontaneous action from people who are fed up with the dictatorship. They don't have neither freedoms or economy. So when they saw what happened in Tunisia, they just said, we're gonna do something. And from the beginning, it was very spontaneous. People didn't even have plans, and they were raising very, very wide terms like freedom and democracy, and the people demand the fall of the regime. They didn't know exactly what they want. They just wanted this regime to end. So it was very, very spontaneous, and I believe it helped a lot in reforming how my people and how the whole world think about people who believe in democracy, and that people, even if they stayed for a long time under dictatorship, one day they will drop the dictatorship down. Thank you. I think that's enough.